Healthcare is one of the fastest growing industries in the world, and Lehigh is looking to the future. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, employment in the healthcare field is projected to grow 16% over the next decade, adding about 2.6 million new jobs to the economy, more than any other field. The new Integrated Business and Health program prepares students to become leaders in this ever-growing industry. The 4-year inter-college interdisciplinary program focuses on the combination of business principles and an in-depth knowledge of health and health policy, empowering graduates to thrive in the global health market. Healthcare is about helping people, but it's more than just treating patients. It's about supply chains, business management, finance, and technology. Lehigh's IBH program will train a new class of leadership in these fields and open the door to exciting career opportunities. The IBH integrated program brings the best of business and health together and prepares students to make an impact in a high-demand field.
Hi, everybody. I'm Beth Dolan, Dean of the College of Health at Lehigh. I want to welcome all of you and thank you for joining us for the 6th and final session of our Population Health Colloquium series focused on the business of health. The College of Health has hosted annual colloquium series since we opened in 2020. Each series celebrates a milestone, initiative, or goal for our college. This colloquium series celebrates the new intercollegiate program, Integrated Business and Health, which is a collaboration between the colleges of health and business. The program welcomed its first cohort this semester, and several students are in attendance. If you missed our first 5 sessions in this series, they're now available on the College of Health YouTube channel. Today's session, NextGen Health, Startup Leaders on the Future of Care, features Lehigh parent and entrepreneur Marc Tarpenning moderating a panel of healthcare startup founders, all of whom are Lehigh alumni. Before we get started, I want to offer a few housekeeping notes. So first, we invite you to enter questions using the Q&A tab on your screen at any time during the panel discussion. Since we're celebrating a new program, we will try to answer student questions first. Any student at Lehigh. So if you are a student, please let us know in the text of your question. It's also an honor for me to introduce my colleague and the co-host of today's session, Lisa Getzler, the Vice Provost of Entrepreneurship at Lehigh. I've asked her to co-host our session to emphasize Lehigh's long tradition of educating innovators and entrepreneurs, though we were more likely in the past to call them simply problem solvers. With Lisa's leadership, Lehigh is now working to connect, formalize, and build entrepreneurial opportunities and education for students and faculty. She's responsible for leading entrepreneurship strategy and practice within the framework of Lehigh University's Future Maker strategy. She and her team work to enhance the impact of faculty and student research, to provide immersive entrepreneurial opportunities for students at all levels, and to support economic development in our region by facilitating the creation of new startup companies and nonprofit ventures. Democratizing entrepreneurship for students, faculty, and alumni from underrepresented groups, providing access to resources that facilitate an entrepreneurial journey, and creating assessment tools that directly and authentically measure student performance in multidisciplined, team-based, immersive learning environments have been key focus areas during Lisa's tenure at Lehigh. Lisa counts many aspects of her life and work at Lehigh and beyond as both fulfilling and joyful. These include co-founding the Baker Institute for Entrepreneurship, Creativity, and Innovation, spearheading a partnership between Lehigh and the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center in San Francisco, which led Lehigh to the development of a permanent year-round presence now known as Lehigh West, launching Lehigh Ventures Lab, an accelerator for full-time founders, practicing and facilitating design thinking for innovation at Lehigh, co-founding and curating TEDx Lehigh River, founding and operating a boutique design firm through its acquisition, founding 2 nonprofits, and being a mom. Lisa has been named a Lehigh Valley Woman of Influence and received Lehigh's Hillman Award for major impact on advancing the role of entrepreneurship at Lehigh. I'm now going to turn it over to Lisa to introduce our amazing Lehigh alumni who are also entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Beth. I will add to all of that, and thank you so much. that partnering with the College of Health is significantly changing the ways in which our community of entrepreneurial thinkers and doers can move their ideas forward at Lehigh. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's guests. First, Marc Tarpenning, who will moderate this discussion. After completing a computer science degree from UC Berkeley, Marc worked in Saudi Arabia for several years before coming home to Silicon Valley. In the late 90s, he teamed up with Martin Eberhard and founded Nuvo Media, a pioneering electronic book company that was acquired by Gemstar TV Guide. Soon after, Marc and Martin reunited to found Tesla Motors. Tesla dominates the electric car industry, became a public company in 2010, and is currently the most valuable car company on earth. He is currently on the advisory board of UC Berkeley's Sutarja Center for Technology and Entrepreneurship, a trustee of the Archaeological Institute of America, and a mentor for UC Berkeley's Skydeck Accelerator program. He joined Spero Ventures in 2018 and leads their sustainability investments. He sits on many startup company boards. He is also a frequent guest lecturer at that other school in the Bay Area. And the Office of Entrepreneurship here at Lehigh has been blessed to have Marc join our advisory group of experts that are helping us shape and launch Lehigh's newest addition to our startup ecosystem, the Venture Studio. Thank you for being here, Marc. On today's panel will be Chris MacDonald, Brian O'Connell, and Neal Walker. Let me introduce them. Starting with Chris. Chris MacDonald is a biotech entrepreneur and scientist dedicated to scaling new life science tools to transform the data we can collect. A Lehigh alum with a BS in engineering physics, Chris is the co-founder of Abrus Bio, where he currently serves as COO and CSO, developing transformative single-molecule protein sequencing technology. An X Prize winner for his work on rapid COVID testing at ChromaCode, Chris specializes in translating complex science into scalable market solutions. He also serves as a lecturer in the Department of Bioengineering at UC San Diego, where he earned his PhD. My favorite sentence in Chris's LinkedIn profile is, "I build great products that help people." Next, please welcome Brian O'Connell. After graduating from Lehigh with a BS in electrical engineering, Brian worked in both engineering and sales roles before obtaining an MBA from Wharton. He went on to build his career in the medical device and consumable medical product industry, beginning with cross-functional roles at Cardiac Pacemakers, Inc. and Guidant Corp., culminating with his role as corporate vice president and general manager of the $1.5 billion coronary stent business unit. Brian went on to serve as CEO of Myocor, a VC-backed mitral valve repair company, and then went on to own Key Surgical, a manufacturer of consumable products for the sterile environments in hospitals and surgery centers. Brian took Key Surgical from 12 employees and $3.5 million in revenue to over 300 employees in 6 countries worldwide and $200 million in revenue. Key Surgical was sold to Steris, and Brian retired in 2021. He currently serves on the board of directors for several medical device and philanthropic organizations. He has 2 college-age sons and lives with his wife in Minnesota, enjoying golfing, boating, and trying to be better at playing guitar. And finally, Neal Walker. Neal is co-founder, CEO, and chair of the board of directors at Aclaris Therapeutics, a biopharmaceutical company that strives to translate scientific discovery into everyday victories in immuno-inflammatory conditions. Neal is a board-certified dermatologist and serial entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience in the life science industry. He began his pharmaceutical industry career at Johnson & Johnson. He then founded NextGen, a biopharmaceutical assets management company, and went on to be co-founder, president, and CEO of LifeSci Therapeutics, a dermatology-focused specialty pharmaceutical company, which was acquired by Allergan. Neal continued his formidable track record as a serial entrepreneur, leading companies like Octagon and Trigensis through major acquisitions, and his ongoing governance roles on the boards of Aldera Therapeutics and several private biotech ventures. Neal's journey began with a BS in biology from Lehigh, MBA from Wharton, and Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine from the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, although they may not have been in that order. He has been awarded the Frank Baldino Bioscience CEO of the Year and the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year in Greater Philadelphia. Neal is a fellow of the American Academy of Dermatology. Please welcome Marc, Chris, Brian, and Neal. Marc, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. That was a great introduction and very inspiring just in the introduction. I'm going to start with a few questions here, and people, out in the audience, please be prepping your questions. That's your homework that you're supposed to be doing while we're talking here. So, Brian, I'm going to start with you, I think. So you went from medical devices to, it was a very complicated, sophisticated things. And when I spoke to you before this panel discussion, it seemed like your final fantastic, exit really came with low-tech stuff. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the market space is full of things, and there's business opportunities both in the high-tech, sexy stuff that gets all the press, pacemakers and intraocular lenses and artificial hearts. But hospitals run on a variety of things, and the healthcare system needs everything to run. The chain is only as strong as the each link. And at Key Surgical, I went from implantable cardiac products that were directly life-saving themselves to selling stuff that was the equivalent of kind of rubber bands and paper clips to the hospitals. But without those products, the instruments that get used in every surgery don't get sterilized, and then no operations occur, and then the hospital shuts down. So for me, the motivation in healthcare has always been, can I work in a business that has some sort of psychological income to me, meaning, it makes people feel better. It does good for the world. And that was very important to me. And I thought maybe I would struggle a little bit moving from the high-tech, directly life-saving stuff of the cardiology world to the more lower-tech, supply-based world. But that was not the case at all. There were still regulatory issues to deal with, engineering issues to deal with, manufacturing issues to deal with, business issues to deal with. And these products were incredibly important to the hospital. So to me, they were equally enjoyable, but very different on both sides of that.
How did you find the opportunity, though? I mean, you're selling all this, super high tech stuff. Did you just look around and go, huh, some of this other stuff is not working well, or?
No, it was an opportunity that a colleague of mine from Guidant and I came across. And Key Surgical, the company that we bought in 2005. And by the way, we bought it and we mortgaged everything that we both had. I was in 2005, I was almost 43. I had an 8-month-old son. My second son wasn't even in the cards yet. We both cashed in all our retirement savings. We mortgaged the equity in our houses, and we borrowed a couple $1,000,000 from the Small Business Administration to buy this business. And this business was founded by my business partner's mom and 2 other nurses. She wanted to retire. The other 2 didn't want to buy her out. And we thought we could do better with this business given our experience. And we were both looking for a change. But there's nothing like being a 43-year-old guy with an infant son and having a massive amount of negative net worth to make you motivated. But it turned out okay, but it was a wonderful experience. If you're willing to tolerate the risk, I would encourage anybody to make a wise, calculated decision and be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's a great, willing to tolerate the risk. But when you were making it, did it feel super risky, or did you feel like, I think we can really make this happen, and I know if I do this, this, and this, I'm going to have to, raise some money. I'm going to have to, but
Yeah.
were you ever thinking this is so risky, I can't possibly, where did
No,
that?
I don't know why I didn't, but I think it was because of the calculus that went into this. I knew a lot about the medical space. I knew a lot about business. I had some ideas that I think could improve this business that we acquired. And so I had a level of confidence that was good, but not bordering on arrogance, because that's where you get into trouble. But we never borrowed money after we bought the business. We financed the business through its own growth, and then we partnered with a private equity firm. And that's where, to be honest with you, we made 5 acquisitions with our PE partners. We were the platform company. But that's where I think I should have lost more sleep, because all those acquisitions, other than the first one, were financed with debt. And we had 150, $160 million in debt when we exited the company, which is fine because we sold the company for $850 million. But I don't know how I went to sleep at night knowing that, hey, we owe $160 million, but the business was going great, and you get comfortable with it. I don't know how I did it, but I got comfortable with it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, we're going to come back to that in a
Okay.
minute here. So Neal, I've got to ask you, so from your bio that I read in our discussion, you actually started a company, if I may make sure I'm getting this right, during your residency. Is that right?
Yes, yep, I did, and normally you wouldn't think that would be possible, but I think dermatology lends itself to, you don't have a lot of call, and you don't have a lot of weekends that you have to work, and so I have a twin brother. He identified an opportunity, basically digitizing all the paper that gets sent down to the FDA. So we did some of the very first true electronic submissions to the agency, making navigable CDs, if you remember CDs. So
they're round, for those in the audience that are too young, they're these round, like little record things that you put into a special little reader.
Right. So clearly now everything's done through electronic portals, but there was a lot of regulation that went into digitizing that. It wasn't very easy, and back before then, you would literally send 2 semi trucks down filled with paper to the agency, like quite literally. So he had identified an opportunity, a market need, when he was doing consulting for AstraZeneca at the time. And he had a regulatory background, I had the clinical background, and recruited a gentleman from Accenture who had a great IT background. And we just got started, 3 of us. And very similar to Brian, put our own money in, scaled it up to about 5 million at that time in terms of the annual run rate. And then, started raising our first series of venture capital and scaled it from there.
Yeah, fascinating. So I started dating my wife when she was in residency. She was family practice though, and there's no, I mean, sleeping was the only thing that could be possible when she wasn't in the hospital. But I'm super impressed by that. And it's an interesting thing too that you saw, much like Brian, an opportunity that was not exactly in the derm space, frankly, uh, and kind of went for it, even though it wasn't really quite your thing.
Yeah.
But you had the right people around you.
That's right. And I think, and Brian kind of alluded to this, you talk about risk, and I always kind of, you get comfortable feeling uncomfortable there. But I think part of what gives you comfort is when you have the domain expertise. So my brother, myself, and our other co-founder had all worked in the space for a decent amount of time. And so we had at least a reasonable understanding of the actual details and nuts and bolts, and that gave us a lot of confidence. And you tend to ignore all the naysayers, and there are plenty of them, but thank God we did do that, and we ultimately sold that company to Accenture years later after scaling it up. And it was a wonderful experience, much more meaningful than anything that I had gotten out of, let's say, business school, right? Because you're learning on the fly. You're getting things like your first office, which in our case was a little 1-room office above a donut shop, right? And like, these are all very real things where, each year you're just wondering if you're going to be able to, like Brian was mentioning, pay the debt down, get that next client to help kind of kick the revenue down the road. So it's, yeah, my wife wasn't happy about it. She wanted me to just go move to Arizona, open up a derm practice, and that's that.
It worked out, and yeah. So my wife fortunately was so busy doing the residency thing, she didn't freak out about the whole startup thing, so that worked out as well. I do question doing a healthcare startup above a donut shop, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah, times have changed.
Yes, although I do love that. Chris, um, you're a little bit closer in my world in that you're an electrical engineer, as I remember from Lehigh, and you did a whole bunch of other stuff. And then now you're back in the startup world. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, so I did electrical engineering and engineering physics, triple E program. Apparently, there's one student currently at Lehigh that does that right now. It's a very niche pathway. I finished up in 2005, and then eventually ended up at UCSD and did my PhD there. That was in the bioengineering department, and I had not taken a single biology class in undergrad. And so kind of learned my way through that area for about 6 years because I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. And in fact, entrepreneurship was not on my to-do list at the time, really at all. So very much in a different realm over here. And there's actually a couple differences that I want to highlight as I get through that journey. Right? Number one is I never intended to be. I know people who are in grad school and their entire goal is to start a company. Mine was mostly to get a job. And so, after I finished my PhD, I went to go and just try and get a job. And I ended up getting a job in manufacturing engineering at Illumina. So the flow cells and the reagents that ship out billions of dollars worth that power DNA sequencers, if you read a study or heard anything about anything getting sequenced, probably anywhere between 2011 and 2017 or so, that was probably a consumable that I worked on and helped scale up the manufacturing for. Unlike with electrical engineering and fabs, right? This was very much a bespoke art, right? We had PhD scientists on the manufacturing line trying to figure out how things worked because we didn't really understand anything about how these things really worked in DNA sequencing. You're building it while you learn it at the time. But then I kind of fell into a startup after that. I got recruited to join a 5-person company, which was a diagnostic company. So I decided that sounded like a good, transition, and worked and helped them build out their various teams, data science, back to my computational background and things like that. Grew them to about 100 people through COVID. So the timing worked out that we were a PCR testing company and trying to figure out what to do when the pandemic hit. And so, we all were at home like everybody else. And we said, I guess we should make a COVID test, right? Because I guess what else are you going to do? You're a PCR company. You can manufacture enzymes and reagents and things like that. So we put together a test and we got it on the market very, very quickly, like in April. That is what allowed us to go from a company that did $40,000 in sales to $40 million in sales in 12 months. So now I get to put on my resume scaled manufacturing and sales by 10,000% year over year, which I think is actually right on line with, OpenAI and Anthropic right now. We unfortunately topped out a little lower than they did. But it was a really great experience. I got to meet a lot of investors. I got to meet a lot of people in the space and learn about how companies are built and formed in life science tools. And that led me to starting Abrus Bio here, which is trying to build a protein sequencer. So the idea that we can sequence DNA, right, and get all of this information from it has not translated to proteins yet. We don't have a tool that can read proteins. And a drug, if you run a therapeutics company, 98% of the time is targeting proteins in the body. So my customers are people like Neal's company, right, where they say, I'm making a drug and I don't know what this is actually doing because I don't have a tool to measure it. This is very deep technology, and this is probably one of the big divergent points in my story and Neal and Brian. I did not mortgage my house to do this. I took a lot of dilution and went to investors because we don't know if our approach is physically possible or not. This is not a risk. I can say, you know what, I know the space really well. We think this is probably going to work. I can look at the chemistry, but we are inventing new chemistries, new technologies as we go. And so for me, from our risk-based decision, right, for starting this company was, I'm going to go use other people's money instead of my own to do this, right? The trade-off, of course, is that I presumably own less of this company than they do. But understanding that I am at a much higher risk profile for the company was a really important factor in how I decided to start the company with my co-founder.
Yeah, that's a fantastic segue. And you have science risk, which, for those in the audience that are not familiar with, VCs and how they slice things up, there's market risk, there's execution risk. Like market risk is everyone going to buy the product, and execution risk is, can they actually do it? Engineering risk, if there's engineering has to be a little cutting edge. Science risk is its own category where you don't know if the universe is going to permit it. And
Right.
There are special investors that specialize in that, of course. So, because maybe just for a moment before I switch to other topics, how um, how did you go about raising money with Science Risk?
It was very hard. We talked to a lot of people, but we had to really understand, I think, what people had tried before and why it had failed, all the way down to the chemical details of, here are the actual chemical structures that you're trying to target and you're trying to break down. This is what the electrons are doing in there. Ran simulations, like a lot of detailed work on there, and being able to articulate these are the different roadblocks. And we approached it like an engineering problem. This is where someone failed. So we are going to architect a system that doesn't do that. Right. So then we said, let's try a different approach. So using pieces of chemistry that we know do work, we think this is a plausible path to actually get this done. Most people just say, no, that's scary. It's science risk. And investors do not typically like science risk, to be clear. Right. We basically got shut down at 95%, 98% of our conversations. This is deep tech. It might not work. It's going to take us 5 years, 8 years to figure out if it will or not, or if it'll scale. There's a couple high-profile failures in this specific area where they went to investors, said, you know what, this is going to be awesome. This is our chemistry, and we're going to totally crush it. And then they got a bunch of money, and it didn't actually work at all. So you're also combating that risk profile and what investors have seen and what stories people have told. And so you have to come very, very open. Like, these are the big risks. This is what we don't know. This is why. But if we succeed, this is why this company is going to be worth 1,000 or 10,000 times more than it is right now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And just as an aside, for those who haven't raised money before, almost everybody says no. I mean, just in general. So the fact that, nearly everybody said no for science risk is not a surprise. The fact that you got somebody who said yes is awesome. But
I agree. We're happy someone said yes. We closed our Series A and managed to pull $15 million from two VCs and a couple other investors in the fall. And that was, I think, very, very fortunate for us right now, given the current environment.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Let me see. So kind of looking back, and since I didn't go to Lehigh, I can't, really kibitz on this. But so Brian, like looking back, what was the thing at Lehigh that kind of was the best thing that you did, or not best thing you did, but what prepared you for that moment when you looked around and said, "Oh, this is what I'm going to do."
A couple
If
things.
anything.
I knew I wanted to be an engineer because I liked, knowing how stuff worked. And I started out as a mechanical engineer and realized I didn't like that as much. So I switched to be an electrical engineer. So it was, Lehigh has a unique environment to allow you to learn. That said, though, Lehigh's not easy, and you get out of it what you put into it. So I appreciated the opportunity that presented, and the faculty and the content and the place. But then I think equally, I learned as much from the people around me in the classroom and my friends. And college is an academic experience and a life experience. And I think people struggle when they don't figure out that it's both. If they spend all their time with their nose in a book, they might come out with straight A's, but they struggle figuring out how the world works and how to interact with the mechanics of life. And then there's people who spend too little time with their nose in a book, and they realize, I'm not going to graduate on time, and it might make it harder for me to get a job. So I think you gotta find a place that offers you the best of both those orbs, if you will. But you also, as a student, have to make sure you have a foot in each of them. So learn your stuff, but learn how to be an adult functioning member of society. And college and Lehigh is a great place to do that.
That's great. When I think about, all of your paths, and mine included, to the successes that, we've had, they don't seem very linear. And I'm frequently, asked by students, what exactly am I supposed to do, and how am I supposed to get there, and what's the path? I'm on this path, and I have to make everything work exactly the right. It doesn't seem like any of you actually did that. So maybe Neal, what's your thought on that? I mean, you were going to be a dermatologist and working in Arizona.
Yeah. And I honestly, I wish people wouldn't do that to the kids, right? Like I think if you know exactly what you want to do at 18 or 19, you're either incredibly lucky or maybe you're just way ahead of the curve. But my father was a mechanical engineering professor at Lehigh for many years. He said he told both my brother and I, you got to go into engineering. It's non-negotiable. I lasted in materials engineering for about 3 years, switched to biology, said I'm going to go to med school, went to med school, got into rotation, said I really don't like the hospital. So that kind of is limiting, went into dermatology, and then, I always had the pull. And I think that's one of the reasons I went into healthcare is, you have a certain degree of autonomy there, to kind of be your own boss, as it were, and guide your own path. And I really enjoyed seeing patients, and then wanted to increase my sphere of influence. I was seeing patients 2 days a week, and that's kind of where the calculated risk came in. I mean, I knew I wasn't gonna not have money to pay bills, because I always had that as a fallback. But the other 5 days out of the week, I could do all the entrepreneurial ventures. And so that's what I did. And now, here I am several years later, and I've had a number of tech startups, some in the life science, some in med device, sit on a number of boards, running a public company, which is fascinating. Just understanding how that all works. And it's, I could never have imagined painting that picture back from getting into engineering.
Mark, it's a great thing because I think I have a senior in high school and a junior in college, and I'm 63, and I think kids today feel an undue pressure to make sure that if I don't pick the right school to go to, that's a huge life altering decision. If I don't get the right first job, if I don't pick the right major, and I would encourage everybody to ignore all of that. You're going to have 3, 4, 5, 6 different careers in the 30, 35 years you're going to work once you graduate from college. And you should be comfortable with that. You should be open to learning in all of those. And you shouldn't be afraid to fail a couple times, because you got into Lehigh, which is no small task. You're going to graduate from Lehigh, which is no small task. You're going to be fine. But this pressure, and I don't know where it comes from, of, boy, I'm going to be an accounting major and I need to be an accountant the rest of my life. Well, if you want to go from accounting into med school, figure out a way to do it, because it's probably possible. But the constraints that are applied, I don't know where it's coming from, but break those bonds and be open to 3, 4, 5, 6 different careers over your life.
Hey, Brian, how did you end up at Lehigh? Because I heard Neal basically went there because his dad was a professor there, right? And for me, I went there because my cousin was the basketball coach at Lehigh back then. Yeah. And I had gone up here for Thanksgiving every year, and I'm like, oh, this seems fine.
Yeah, so I from 3rd grade on, I grew up in New Jersey. So I was looking at engineering schools, and I'm trying to remember, I got into Lehigh, Lafayette, Duke. I think I got rejected at Cornell. I got into a couple others, and I toured all of them. And I had no geographic preference or anything like that, but I liked the engineering school at Lehigh. It just had the vibe, the feel of it, the facilities, the professors, the way the students looked when they were walking around campus. So I just felt it was kind of a gut thing. I'm like, these are all good schools, but I felt most comfortable there and thought I would get the best engineering education there. So it was a gut level choice for me.
Yeah, I think that was like, I got exposed to it because of that. But you're right, the visit was great and the school was great. I'm very fortunate to have been there, but it wasn't this like extensive list of pros and cons or mapping out my career for the rest of my life and how that was going to get there.
Yeah, and compared to my son, his classmates are like, well, I got into 3 colleges and I got to pick one. And if I make the wrong decision, my life is over. I'm like, no, it's not. You're splitting hairs here at that point. And sometimes better is the enemy of good enough. And don't sweat those kind of decisions. But people are sweating them for some reason, more than they should, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's especially true, in a world in which the future is really uncertain. You want to be flexible. I want to just say that that was my son's experience as well. That he's at Lehigh, and he got into places, we looked, and he was like, "Oh, the feeling of this place is better. I like this. Like this is going to be a good experience." And so far, it has been. So this ability to change direction, and Chris, you're doing something very deep in, I guess it's sort of physics in chemistry, which isn't exactly your background, but I mean physics is, but I mean, and Neal, you've done everything, I think, including like cybersecurity. Like what characteristics, should you be cultivating to allow you to do this kind of flexibility? And maybe I'll throw it to Neal first because we're on Zoom and it's kind of weird if I just don't tell somebody.
Yeah, I just, to me, I'm just constantly looking for gaps or opportunities where, you can create value. And I think Brian said it earlier, Chris maybe as well, where, where you can develop something where you're directly responsible for helping other people. It's, I always kind of view, getting the money and stuff, that's always like a side part. If you're successful, that will come. Particularly if you're a founder, you're going to have a nice piece of all that. So that was never motivating, but I think kind of being a lifelong learner, doing the networking thing is so big, and it's never really emphasized until later in life. Like I never kind of really understood the value of that. But kind of all things being equal, just going around the community, and they all have these kind of business incubator things. VCs have a lot of these kind of things where you can get together and just meet like-minded people. You always refer to it, at least in Philly, it's like the biotech ecosystem, and you just constantly talking and learning to people or learning with people. And then, it's just being fearless in terms of taking that leap. I mean, it's a little bit easier once you get past the first success, to be quite honest, like it always is, right? That's the hardest and the most nerve-wracking. But once you get past that, the money's going to be there because now you're a successful entrepreneur, right? It's going to be very easy to raise capital for even things that maybe shouldn't get funded. But I would say all those kind of traits and just wanting to hustle, like I mean, for me at least, I just get bored after 4 or 5 years into something.
Yeah, Chris, anything to add?
Let's see. I think you probably covered really a lot of that. I had a thought and then I lost track of it, I think, as far as that. But on the networking side, I think that's a good valid thing. We had a pre-call probably about 3 months ago. And like the first thing after that call I did was email Mark and be like, "Hey, Mark, I had a question for you because there's something that I wanted to know about that I didn't have an idea of the space." So we had a quick, phone call so I could learn a little bit more about it, right? Making connections and, hey, I have questions. I want to learn this. I want to learn that, right? If you're not finding all of us on LinkedIn right now, you should be doing that, right? Hey, you know what? I saw you guys talk about this. Here's another question that I had or something. Try and engage and try and meet people, I think is going to be really important. Right? You can open those opportunities. That's what a lot of people out here do. It's what a lot of people in the Bay Area do very well. That probably I saw a little bit less of that while I was at Lehigh, at least. And then on the other side, I think that Neal mentioned is curiosity, right? Continuous learning. And that might mean finding you're wrong, right? And trying to adapt, right? A lot of strong opinions weakly held is a good way to think about it, right? I have a good idea. This is going to be amazing. This is a gap. And then you go and you learn something. You're like, nope, that was a terrible idea. All right, next one. And kind of continue to move on as we iterate through our chemistry or the science or our business ideas, right? Being able to learn, move it, and then change your opinion, I think is very valuable.
Yeah, I totally. And I'm also going to throw in something else, and I'll ask Brian if he's got anything. Is that I think that being able to, I mean, the networking thing I didn't appreciate until later, and it really, really makes a difference. And it's not because it's some old boys club or something like that. It's just that, you can reach out to people who have expertise and you find opportunity in doing that. And I think that's just super important. I also think that being able to tell a story in a convincing way, because especially when you're raising money, you have to be able to tell the story in a very clear, convincing way that, isn't that's on us. That's completely on us, because the investors will see right through that otherwise. And likewise, to motivate a team, it seems like you need to be able to tell the story of why we're doing this, why this is important. And if you can't tell the story, then they don't even know really what they're working on. So that's my 2 cents. I'm into storytelling. And Brian, anything else? And I'm going to move on.
I mean, two things. Networking is critical. I mean, humans as a species, I think, are pre-wired to want to assist each other. So if you know somebody who has a subject matter expertise and you call them up, they're going to want to help you, unless they're, dealing with some critical matter at the moment. So people need to be less reluctant about asking for assistance. Nobody's the smartest person in the room. The collective is stronger than any one individual. The other thing I'll say is, I was a sales guy for a while, and everything is sales, whether you like it or not. When you applied to college, you were having a sales call to try to convince the school to buy your product, which is you. When you're raising money, you're trying to get somebody to say yes. And consumers, businesses, governments, everything votes with their dollars. So when we're in healthcare, we think, well, this is altruistic. This is for the common good. This is great. But that doesn't make the world spin or the business of healthcare spin. If you're going to invest in a company, you believe those dollars are going to be better suited in that company than in some other company. So understanding things like opportunity costs and understanding that people vote with dollars and businesses, investors vote with dollars, it's critical to getting stuff done. And it's a skill that we don't necessarily always teach. You just got to learn it sometimes the hard way.
And I think what you said really resonated with me about networking is asking for help. It's not, like Mark said, it's not going and getting a beer and playing golf with people, right? Or something else, right? It's like, hey, you are really good here. I want to learn from you. And people respond so positively to that, right? Or if you're not looking for a job, like do informational interviews and try and learn what people do, right? The best way to get people to do a big favor for you is to ask them to do a little favor first, because people like helping.
And when possible, call them. Don't text them, don't email them, talk as a human.
Yeah, that's great advice. And one of the people that I know who's the most open to that eventually put his brain into silicon, and that's Reid Hoffman, who was the founder of LinkedIn. So when you ever use LinkedIn, you are looking at somebody who is an expert networker and asked for help from everybody all the time and connected everybody all the time and delivered help to everybody all the time. And then eventually he just, instantiated himself on the web, which I thought was quite clever. So I do have a few questions that have come in. And what I know so Brian, you had mentioned the sort of psychological income. And what exactly did you mean by that? And Chris and Neal, did you also have that same sort of thought process in your startups?
I mean, for me, I use that term a lot, but I just discovered something in my core, for lack of a better word, that I was more motivated being in an industry or a workspace that at the end of the day had some net contributory value to society as a whole. I mean, there's very important businesses everywhere. The lumber business is important, the food business is important, the automobile business is important. But I just couldn't get as psyched up about those businesses personally as I could. We're saying, am I working in something? And at the end of the day, is somebody better for it? It's still a business. There's profits, there's losses, there's good decisions, bad decisions. But I decided I want to be associated with my work in something that had that aspect to it. Now, some people are like total car fanatics and they want nothing more than to design really cool cars. And that's fantastic. More power to them. For me personally, I just wasn't as motivated by that. So I was looking for that altruistic motive a little bit.
And Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're all in this, health and, population health colloquium panel, right, for a reason. And that is something that I think is important, likely to those of us on the call, right? Personally, before Lehigh, and when I was a kid, when my little sister was 5, she got cancer. And I saw that process, and that was, really difficult for everybody. She's a survivor, so, things are fine now. But I think, understanding how we can use technology or use new tools to help people, I think is something that's really important to me and more meaningful than making more money in a different industry. So I think that's a really big part for me of who I am as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's well said on both levels. I also think it is fascinating, that, I mean, just the human body and physiology, like how much we've learned, but how much we just have no clue about just yet. So it just feels like such a frontier. I mean, in a way, it's kind of like the AI problems that everybody's pounding through, and so it is, you just think about the last 20 years, the discoveries that have been made just in oncology alone, things that were literally killing people. And now, you get 20-year survival. So.
Yeah, it is. So I'm both as a venture capitalist, but our firm really only, the mission-driven founder thing, but it's actually something we believe in, that you want to invest in companies that make the world the future, because when startups by definition create the future, that's how we build the future, and you want to invest or be part of or run or create startups that make a future that people want to be in. So if it's just like selling more ads to people, like that's probably not a future anyone really, really wants. But you did mention, Neal, AI. And AI is disrupting everything. I had a lovely coding weekend with Claude last weekend, and Claude and I are becoming good friends as a programmer. So what is the impact of AI in your world, Neal? And like, what do you see? And I'm going to go around to everybody because it seems it is disrupting everything at the moment.
Well, I think maybe two areas. I mean, the obvious one is drug discovery. And we've used some of those solutions. I don't know that I'm totally satisfied with where those are at the moment, but it's just early days. I think the other piece is just productivity. I mean, and Chris and Brian probably have seen this. It's like I have never in my career seen a competitive landscape as intense as this is on the therapeutic side. Everybody talks about all the drug discovery going on in China and everything else, and that's very real. In fact, we acquired a couple assets from China 2 years ago. They've gotten really good at developing molecules, just really good chemistry, and I just trying to get a solution that helps you cull through all of that in a very quick way has been really helpful. A lot easier than trying to pull 50 papers and trying to summarize all those. So I've kind of seen more of an impact so far on just trying to ferret through and summarize in my own mind where the current competitive landscape and thinking is. I do know that there are good AI solutions out there for the drug discovery process, but I think still needs a little work, at least from my limited experience with it.
Yeah, from my perspective, there's three areas where AI really hits. I echo the productivity one, where you can just get more done in less time at less cost with the right deployment of AI tools. So it just makes your business run better and takes cost out of the business. The second thing is it is kind of destroying some areas that my prior company would spend a lot of money on. We'd spend a lot of money on marketing and web development and stuff like that. And you kind of viewed it as a necessary cover charge, but now all of a sudden you can get Claude to write your website and program your website for you for a fraction of the cost that you paid somebody to do your website. And so again, that's a productivity cost thing, but it's destroying like the people who code for a living and the advertising business and that kind of stuff. And that's just, just like personal computers destroyed the typewriter business, that stuff happens. But specifically in the medical space, where I see a lot of it is, I'm not in the pharmaceutical side. I don't know a lot about drug development, but in cardiology in particular, it's it's really changing the game from a diagnostic perspective where, somebody has an EKG or an echocardiogram or a diagnostic test, and the test would have to occur, then somebody would have to read the test, then a report would have to be generated and sent. All that stuff is done by AI now, and a physician will look at the end result and kind of do a quick validation, did the machine get it right? But a doctor, can read, 5 to 10 times more echocardiograms and EKGs in a day than they could without AI. It just makes the doctors more productive, but it's changing the game on a diagnostic perspective a lot.
Yeah, for sure. For us, there's a couple of different things. We use it during execution and marketing, and I'll touch on that for a second. But actually, for our pitch, I think one of the things that's been gotten a lot of traction with investors, right, is that I talked to someone, a CEO of a therapeutics company, right, and they can use AI to design 10,000 possible drugs, right? The thing AI is not going to do is see which one of those worked. And so a tool that can generate the data that lets you screen all those ideas is going to be even more in demand than it was before. Right? So if you think about the era of biology, right, the bottleneck in biology is often the actual collection of the data now, not the model or the idea. And so if you think about where the market is going, there's a narrative there that actually connects really well with investors that if you're the tool that can generate the data, aka what we're building, right, this is where things are going to be the bottleneck now. And so that actually is valuable for us, all this generative AI, not in the using of it, which I'll touch on, but just the fact that it exists now pushes the bottleneck of biology to a different place where we're positioned. On the other side, right, we're basically using it in marketing, right, because my customer is an academic lab or someone, right, that wants to go look at proteins and learn something new. We're in an interesting position where an academic PI's literal entire job is to write down everything they did, how they did it, why they made those choices, and what the results were, and then publish it publicly. And so there's 50,000, 100,000 papers that come out every year where basically every single person that could ever possibly be my customer has written down everything. And there's no way to do that to look at that, right, in any sense of the way. And so people say, in our case, plasma proteomics, really big market, obvious. And so everybody goes after that, right? But if you look at it, right, I can say, okay, great, let's go read 50,000 papers. It cost me $2,000 in credits on Claude or something. And let's assemble an actual picture of the market, exactly what they're doing, what they need, and what they're going to do, and what they said their limitations of their current technology are. They write all of that, and they post it publicly. So this is a very unique space in that is literally my customer's job is to publish all of that. And so generative AI can take advantage of this in a very powerful way that was not possible 2-3 years ago.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it is that you're discovering all of your ideal customers. Just.
Yeah. I mean, they tell you what they want.
Yeah, that is awesome. So a question that came in that I think is relevant is that and this is statistically true, is that men start businesses at a higher rate than women. And the question is, do we see the gender balance changing over time? And I will end it with, and I don't know what your perspectives are. I mean, we happen to be all men on the panel, which is, the way it is. But so do we believe it's changing? Anybody?
Yes.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
All of my upper management at Key Surgical was women. And but I just picked the best person for the job. So it didn't matter to me. I mean, it's hard that it's sad that we're still having this question, and it's a reality that gender bias still exists, and it's unfortunate. But when you're starting a company or you're running a company and you say, I got to make payroll every 2 weeks, how do I make sure I have enough cash to do that? I don't care who you are, what gender you are, what color you are, how tall you are, where you went to school. I just care the job gets done. And, there's nothing like having that pressure to completely throw away all the other garbage you think about and making a decision. You say, I need this done. Who is the best person for this job, period. And that pressure and, being $150 million in debt and all this stuff, that focuses you pretty quick on making the right decision in terms of who's most capable. Who cares who they are, what color they are, doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, I think in my business, we we never really thought about it. I mean, it just happened naturally, just like Brian said. I mean, it was never an issue. And even, some of you may be aware that NASDAQ had a rule that they started a few years ago, which now they've retraced, but you had to have, a certain number of people on your board, that were from underrepresented areas. And it's like, I looked at it, like, yeah, we already have that. Okay. Like, I mean, it's just not something, and I'm with Brian, it's just not something, quite frankly, that maybe this might not be popular to say. I wouldn't force it. It's just, I have to get the right person, no matter who they are, for the job, because I have to answer to shareholders. And when everything's said and done, that's the thing that's one huge thing that motivates me, is I don't want to disappoint the people who've given me hundreds of millions of dollars, and I'm the steward of that capital. Maybe it won't work out because maybe the science isn't there, and things, sometimes drug development doesn't work out more often than not. But I don't want to lose for the wrong reasons, because then I have to go and talk to these folks who trusted me with their capital. And it's a huge responsibility. That's the number one thing, maybe this is off your question, but it's the number one thing that I harp to my team about, that you better be treating every dollar like it's yours, like you just mortgaged your house, because once you spend it, it's gone, right? And, so anyway.
I
think,
do think,
yeah, and getting to changing over time, right? I'm a little bit younger, so I'm 42 now, right? And so I'm earlier in my career. My PhD at UCSD was 50-50 men and women, and several of them have gone to found companies. They haven't got to the points of their careers yet where it's more like, I've sold several companies and things like that, but out here I see a lot of that. Almost recruited a woman co-founder, but she was making way too much money at Google doing AI at the time to be interested in what I could raise to try and get her to join, unfortunately. So I think she probably made a good decision there as well. But I do kind of get into that changing over time. I see a lot of that out here in the San Diego life sciences area. The CEO of Scale Biosciences that just sold for a bunch of money was one of my friends, Giovanna, that I had met at Illumina, and was able to rise from a very low level at Illumina all the way up to leading, marketing departments, and then take over leadership and CEO roles. And that is well recognized here. And she's done a very good job of also networking and growing. But I think that is changing. And I think the trend is there, even though it may appear like things are turning around. I don't necessarily see that as far as the people that I know out here.
Yeah, I'll just say that in the VC space, the companies that we see, it's probably 70% are male started, but we do see more women, and actually some of our very top performing companies in our portfolio are women run and women founded, and including the founder of our firm, Spero Ventures, is a woman. So in fact, there was a moment when, as they were shuffling around the partners, I was the only guy in the firm. It was all women. So yes, it is changing.
I think there's a generational aspect to this, though, where, my dad's generation, my dad passed away a few years ago at the age of 98, right? And 50 years ago, I mean, I don't think we would have Beth running the school and Lisa doing the job that she was doing. There was just more of an overt bias. It was like, no, men do this. And now we're in a generation where successful, intelligent, driven, entrepreneurial women are having these visible roles, performing every bit as well, and in many cases better than men. And now we have a whole generation of people seeing that. And then the next generation, the people who are at Lehigh now, I think when they're my age, are going to say, well, there's way less gender bias, or I'm hope that they're going to say that. But it just takes longer than anybody wants. But I do think it's changed, and it's completely different than it was 50 years ago.
It's also incumbent upon us, right? When I seek out people, to really make sure we're mentoring and helping bring people, not just women, but from non-traditional backgrounds, and really help identify that talent, foster it where they may not have had the opportunities that they should have. And that's an important point of focus in my management, or how we think about it, and it should be for everybody.
I see Lisa has materialized, so I'm gonna hand it to her, but I'm gonna have one lightning round question. You have just one sentence to say, well, or a couple sentences to answer, and I will start with Neal, and that if you could go back and tell your Lehigh self something, like one thing uh, to to change what you would do, is there anything that you would do? Anything you would say?
I would just say stick with the theme that we were talking about before, that I wouldn't sweat trying to get to the end game so quickly. Got 40 years, 50 years to work.
Chris?
Similar, I think when you're looking at that next opportunity and trying to figure it out, right? Don't think 50 years in the future, but think 5, right? What am I going to learn out of this, even if I decide it's not my career, right? How am I going to, grow as a person from whatever decision I'm trying to make?
Brian?
Be in the moment more. It's good to look 5 years ahead, but sometimes when you're doing that, you're forgetting what's, an hour away or in the present. So don't lose sight of being in the moment. But in addition to that, be patient. When I was 22 getting out of Lehigh, to me, thinking of a 35, 40-year career seemed ancient, and it goes by quicker than you think. But be patient, because along the way, you're going to have, like I said, 3, 4, 5 different careers, and buckle up, because some of it's going to be awesome and some of it's going to be terrifying, but it'll be okay. It'll be okay. You're smart people. You know what you're doing. Dust yourself off. It'll all be okay. Don't worry so much.
That is great. Lisa, I'm going to hand it to you.
Thanks, Mark. I didn't actually materialize to wrap things up. I did want to weigh in a little bit on the gender question.
Okay.
Super happy to hear what you all have said and reported. And certainly we have seen that over time, in industry, in our alumni base. But still, when it comes to the work that my team does in entrepreneurship and opportunities for students to start new things, 1 in 10 are women who do that. 1 in 10, and that's on a good year. But of those 1 in 10, the one that does it always does better, almost always does better, gets farther, has something of more substance than many of their male counterparts. So we do ask the question of ourselves a lot, what is it that's stopping young women? And this is not just at Lehigh, this is pretty common across universities. What is stopping young women from putting themselves in the position of being the ones who are going to kind of move outside of their comfort zone and try to start new things? The answer may very well be they're going to do it later, which is also fine. It's harder for us to track. But it does still exist. Obviously, this is something we'll all be working towards. Beth and I talk about it a lot. One of the reasons I participated today was just to show that there are more women who do things that are in leadership roles and who are working on new creative solutions to problems that may need to be solved. So I just wanted to weigh in on that. I also wanted to say that every word each of you said that indicated that students should relax in some way, you all said that, and not to sweat kind of the early stuff, because you've got a great many years ahead of you to do a variety of things. The path will not be linear. The more our students can hear that from you, the more they will recognize it as potentially true. When we say it, it is less heard than when you all say it. And when they do interact with you, and you've all been so generous with our students, and you say it directly to them, it has an impact that you can't imagine, I think. And so engaging with alumni and family and friends of Lehigh who are doing the work in the world that today's students really do want to see themselves doing can best be experienced through conversations with people like you. So we're so grateful. I will happily turn it back to you, Mark, if you have more.
No, I think that concludes the questions.
Great. So we'll turn it back to Beth then, Dean Dolan, to wrap up the event.
You're muted,
Oh,
Beth.
you're muted.
Of course. Well, thank you guys so much. That was a really interesting conversation. It's really inspiring. And I appreciate the wisdom that you're passing on to students in a very direct way. So just want to thank all of you. Mark, thanks for doing an expert job moderating. It was a fun conversation. So I love the, I have a new term, the psychological income, Brian. Thank you for that. It's kind of cool. Love that. All right. Well, thank you guys. Take care. Hope to see you soon. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, thanks.